We live in an age where madness masquerades as reason, where the most destructive movements present themselves as the height of human progress. But what if I told you that behind the seemingly rational veneer of modern political movements lies a profound spiritual sickness, a pathology of the spirit that I have termed pneumopathology? For decades, I have observed how ideological movements, from National Socialism to Marxism, from progressive liberalism to technocratic authoritarianism, all share a common spiritual deformation. They are not merely political disagreements or economic arrangements gone wrong. They represent a fundamental disorder in the human soul, a sickness of the spirit that manifests as the systematic rebellion against the structure of reality itself. This pneumopathology, this pathology of the pneuma, the spirit, reveals itself in the compulsive need to construct a world according to human specifications, rejecting the given order of existence and the transcendent source from which authentic order flows. The patient suffering from this spiritual illness cannot tolerate the tension of existence between time and eternity, between human limitation and divine mystery. Today, we will examine this sickness that has infected the modern mind, understand its symptoms and progression, and discover why recognizing pneumopathology is essential for anyone who seeks to understand the true nature of our civilizational crisis. The diagnosis is disturbing, but understanding the disease is the first step towards spiritual health. Chapter 1: The Nature of Spiritual Sickness. Pneumopathology is not a metaphor. It is a precise diagnostic term for a real spiritual condition that affects both individuals and entire societies. Just as a physician diagnoses bodily illness by observing symptoms and understanding their underlying causes, we can diagnose spiritual illness by recognizing the characteristic patterns of consciousness that reject reality's fundamental structure. The pneumopathological consciousness exhibits several unmistakable symptoms. First, there is the compulsive need to explain existence in purely immanent terms, refusing to acknowledge any transcendent dimension. The patient insists that reality must conform to human reason alone, that mystery must be eliminated, that all questions must have definitive answers within the realm of human manipulation. Second, we observe the phenomenon I call system building, the obsessive construction of comprehensive explanations that claim to unlock the secret of existence. Whether it's Marx's dialectical materialism, Kant's positivism, or Hitler's racial mysticism, the pneumopathological consciousness demands a closed system that explains everything and leaves no room for the unknown. Third, there is the characteristic rebellion against the structure of reality itself. The healthy consciousness accepts the fundamental tension of human existence. We are neither gods nor beasts, but beings suspended between time and eternity, knowing enough to recognize our limitations yet called to participate in truth beyond our comprehension. The pneumopathological consciousness cannot tolerate this tension. The patient seeks to escape the human condition through various forms of what I call metastatic faith, a perverted religiosity that promises to transform the human condition entirely. Instead of accepting our role as participants in a divine cosmos, the pneumopathological consciousness seeks to become the creator of its own cosmos. This spiritual sickness manifests politically in movements that promise to create the perfect society, to eliminate suffering through human planning, to build heaven on earth. The patient projects inner disorder onto external reality, believing that rearranging social institutions will cure the fundamental anxiety of human existence. But the deeper symptom is the loss of what I call questioning consciousness, the fundamental openness to transcendent truth that characterizes healthy spiritual life. The pneumopathological consciousness has closed itself to questions that cannot be answered within its constructed system, becoming spiritually deaf to the call of transcendent reality. Chapter 2: The Gnostic Structure of Pneumopathology. At the heart of pneumopathology lies what I have identified as the Gnostic structure of consciousness, a spiritual deformation that has plagued humanity since ancient times but has reached epidemic proportions in modernity. The Gnostic consciousness believes it possesses secret knowledge about the nature of reality that enables it to fundamentally transform the human condition. This Gnostic pneumopathology manifests in a characteristic pattern: dissatisfaction with the world as it is, conviction that this dissatisfaction is caused by the inadequate organization of reality itself, and belief that salvation lies in restructuring reality according to a special gnosis or knowledge possessed by the Gnostic movement. The Gnostic patient cannot accept that human dissatisfaction might stem from the fundamental structure of existence, from our nature as being suspended between time and eternity, finite yet called to infinite truth. Instead, the Gnostic attributes dissatisfaction to external causes, to capitalism, to traditional religion, to racial mixing, to patriarchy, to whatever convenient scapegoat the particular movement has identified. What makes this particularly dangerous is that Gnostic movements always present themselves as scientific, rational, and progressive. The Marxist claims scientific knowledge of historical laws. The technocrat claims scientific knowledge of optimal social organization. The progressive claims scientific knowledge of human nature and social development. Each believes their gnosis gives them the right and responsibility to reconstruct society. But beneath this rational veneer lies a profoundly irrational revolt against reality itself. The Gnostic consciousness cannot tolerate the fact that human existence involves suffering, limitation, uncertainty, and death. It seeks to overcome these fundamental conditions through the application of special knowledge, whether that knowledge is called science, reason, progress, or evolution. The pneumopathological Gnostic develops what I call pneumatological symbols, perverted spiritual symbols that promise to deliver what only authentic transcendence can provide. The classless society, the 1,000-year Reich, the new man, the end of history, these are all pneumatological symbols that function as substitutes for genuine religious experience. The patient becomes intoxicated by these symbols, losing the capacity for critical reflection. The movement becomes a vehicle for escaping the anxiety of existence rather than facing it with the courage that genuine spiritual life requires. The Gnostic follower experiences the intoxicating sense of participating in ultimate reality while actually fleeing from authentic encounter with transcendent truth. This is why Gnostic movements are invariably totalitarian in tendency, even when they begin with humanitarian rhetoric. The logic of Gnosticism demands the complete transformation of reality, which means the elimination of all obstacles to the realization of the Gnostic dream, including, ultimately, those human beings who refuse to be transformed. Chapter 3: The Historical Progression of Pneumopathology. The pneumopathological consciousness has not appeared suddenly in modernity. Rather, it represents the culmination of a long historical process of spiritual decay that began with the breakdown of classical philosophy and Christian symbolism in the late medieval period. Understanding this progression is crucial for grasping why our age has become particularly susceptible to this spiritual disease. In the classical and early Christian periods, human consciousness remained open to transcendent reality. Greek philosophy, particularly in Plato and Aristotle, recognized that human knowledge participates in divine truth without exhausting it. Christian symbolism expressed the fundamental tension of existence through the doctrine of the Incarnation, divine and human united yet distinct, eternal truth entering time without being reduced to temporal categories. But beginning in the late medieval period, we observe the gradual closure of the soul to transcendent reality. Nominalism denied the reality of universal forms, preparing the ground for the reduction of reality to particular facts manipulable by human reason. The wars of religion discredited traditional religious symbols for many intellectuals, creating a vacuum that would be filled by secular substitutes. The Enlightenment marked a crucial stage in the development of pneumopathology. While retaining the formal structure of Christian hope, Enlightenment thinkers projected this hope onto purely immanent processes. Progress, reason, and science became the new trinity that would deliver humanity from its traditional limitations. This was not atheism in the simple sense, but rather a perverted form of religious consciousness that sought salvation within history rather than beyond it. Take this moment to examine your own intellectual formation. How many of the ideas you absorbed in education carried this pneumopathological structure without your realizing it? The belief that human problems have purely human solutions, that sufficient knowledge and organization can eliminate tragedy from life, that traditional wisdom is merely superstition to be overcome by scientific enlightenment. The 19th century witnessed the full flowering of pneumopathological movements. Marx's dialectical materialism promised the scientific resolution of all social contradictions. Kant's positivism claimed to have discovered the laws of social development. Darwinian evolutionism was transformed from biological theory into total worldview promising unlimited human advancement. Each of these movements exhibited the classic Gnostic structure: special knowledge about the nature of reality, promise of salvation through the application of this knowledge, and conviction that resistance to the movement represented either ignorance or malice. The pneumopathological patient cannot conceive that reasonable people might reject their vision for legitimate philosophical reasons. The 20th century revealed the practical consequences of pneumopathology when these movements gained political power. National Socialism, Marxist communism, and various forms of progressive totalitarianism all demonstrated how the spiritual sickness of Gnosticism inevitably produces social and political pathology. But the disease has not disappeared with the defeat of these particular movements. It has merely assumed new forms, often more subtle but no less dangerous. Contemporary environmentalism, transhumanism, technocratic globalism, and various forms of identity politics all exhibit pneumopathological characteristics, promising to resolve fundamental human problems through the reorganization of reality according to special knowledge. Chapter 4: Symptoms in Contemporary Movements. Today's pneumopathological movements have learned to disguise their Gnostic structure more effectively than their 20th century predecessors, but the underlying spiritual sickness remains unmistakable to those trained in proper diagnosis. Let me guide you through the recognition of symptoms in several contemporary manifestations of this ancient disease. Consider first the climate change movement, not the legitimate scientific study of atmospheric conditions, but the apocalyptic movement that has transformed environmental concern into a total worldview. The pneumopathological patient here exhibits classic symptoms: the conviction that human activity has fundamentally disrupted the natural order, the belief that salvation depends on radical reorganization of society according to expert knowledge, and the treatment of skeptics as morally defective rather than simply mistaken. Notice the religious language barely concealed beneath scientific terminology. We hear of carbon sins, environmental salvation, the need for transformation, and saving the planet. The movement promises that sufficient human sacrifice, in the form of reduced consumption, population control, and submission to expert management, will restore paradise on Earth. This is pneumopathology expressing itself through environmental symbols. The transhumanist movement reveals even more clearly the Gnostic structure of contemporary pneumopathology. Here we find the explicit promise to overcome the human condition through technology. Death, aging, suffering, and limitation, all the fundamental aspects of human existence that healthy consciousness accepts as given, are to be eliminated through the application of scientific knowledge. The transhumanist patient cannot tolerate the tension of existence between finite and infinite, mortal and eternal. Rather than finding meaning in this tension, as classical and Christian wisdom taught, the pneumopathological consciousness seeks to escape it entirely. The promise is nothing less than technological divinity, the transformation of human beings into gods through artificial intelligence, genetic manipulation, and cybernetic enhancement. In contemporary politics, we observe pneumopathology in movements that promise to eliminate all social conflict through the proper arrangement of institutions. Whether from the progressive left or the technocratic center, These movements share the Gnostic conviction that human problems have essentially technical solutions requiring only the application of correct knowledge by qualified experts. The pneumopathological political patient cannot accept that political life involves permanent tensions between competing goods, between liberty and order, equality and excellence, innovation and tradition. Instead, they promise comprehensive solutions that will resolve these tensions once and for all through the implementation of their particular system. Observe how these movements treat opposition. Disagreement is not seen as legitimate difference of opinion about complex matters, but as evidence of ignorance, moral deficiency, or malicious intent. The pneumopathological consciousness cannot conceive that reasonable, well-intentioned people might reject their vision for philosophical reasons. In academia, pneumopathology manifests as various forms of what I call ideological scientism, the belief that human existence can be completely explained and controlled through the application of scientific method. Whether in neuroscience promising to explain consciousness, economics claiming to optimize social organization, or psychology purporting to engineer human behavior, we find the same Gnostic conviction that mystery can be eliminated through sufficient knowledge. The academic pneumopath exhibits particular symptoms: the reduction of human reality to measurable quantities, the rejection of traditional wisdom as pre-scientific superstition, and the conviction that progress consists in the accumulation of factual knowledge divorced from questions of meaning and purpose. Most dangerous is how these movements affect the formation of consciousness in the young. Educational institutions infected with pneumopathology produce graduates who have lost the capacity for genuine questioning, who mistake information for wisdom, and who cannot distinguish between technical problems requiring human solutions and existential questions that open onto transcendent mystery. Chapter 5: The Pathology of Progress and Perfectibility. The most seductive symptom of contemporary pneumopathology is its appropriation of the authentic human experience of progress and improvement, transforming these legitimate aspirations into Gnostic promises of perfectibility. Understanding this transformation is crucial for anyone seeking to distinguish between healthy human development and spiritual sickness. Human beings are indeed called to growth, learning, and improvement. Classical philosophy recognized this in the concept of paideia, the formation of human character through education in truth, beauty, and goodness. Christian tradition understood it through the doctrine of sanctification, the gradual conformity of the human soul to divine reality. Both traditions affirm genuine progress while maintaining essential limitations. The pneumopathological consciousness perverts this authentic experience of growth into the promise of unlimited perfectibility. The patient cannot accept that human progress occurs within permanent structural limitations, that improvement happens gradually through the formation of character, and that ultimate fulfillment lies beyond temporal existence. Instead, pneumopathology promises comprehensive solutions to comprehensive problems. Consider how progressive movements claim they can eliminate not just particular injustices, but injustice itself through the proper reorganization of society. The pneumopathological patient believes that racism, sexism, poverty, and inequality, all manifestations of fundamental human limitations and the tragic structure of existence, can be permanently overcome through political action. This represents a profound misunderstanding of both the nature of progress and the character of human problems. Authentic progress occurs through the painful process of individual and communal formation in truth and virtue. It requires acknowledging limitation, accepting mystery, and working within the given structure of reality rather than attempting to transcend it. The pneumopathological promise of perfectibility creates what I call revolutionary impatience, the refusal to accept the gradual, incomplete, and limited character of all genuine human improvement. The patient demands immediate, comprehensive, and permanent solutions to problems that may be ameliorated but never finally eliminated within temporal existence. Take a moment to examine your own expectations about social and personal improvement. Do you find yourself frustrated when political reforms fail to produce immediate transformations? Do you expect technological advances to solve fundamental human problems? Do you become impatient with the slow work of character formation and community building? This impatience leads inevitably to the embrace of revolutionary solutions that promise to cut through the complexity of human existence with decisive action. Whether it's the promise to fundamentally transform society, to create new men and women through education, or to eliminate suffering through perfect institutions, the structure remains gnostic. The perfectibility pneumopath cannot tolerate the fact that human existence involves permanent tensions that must be managed rather than resolved. The tension between individual freedom and social order, between innovation and tradition, between diversity and unity, these are not problems to be solved but conditions to be navigated with wisdom, patience, and humility. When these tensions are treated as problems requiring comprehensive solutions, the result is always some form of tyranny. The revolutionary movement must eliminate whatever prevents the realization of perfectibility, which ultimately means eliminating the human beings who embody the permanent limitations that the Gnostic consciousness refuses to accept. The therapeutic dimension of pneumopathology is particularly visible in contemporary culture, where traditional spiritual practices have been replaced by various forms of self-improvement technology promising unlimited personal transformation. The healthy soul understands that spiritual development involves accepting limitation while growing within it. The pneumopathological soul demands techniques for transcending limitation entirely. This extends to how we understand education, relationships, and community life. The pneumopathological consciousness approaches these as technologies for producing desired outcomes rather than as spheres of existence within which we participate in goods that transcend our manipulation and control. Chapter 6: The Recovery of Questioning Consciousness. The healing of pneumopathology begins with the recovery of what I call questioning consciousness, the fundamental openness to transcendent reality that allows the soul to participate in truth without claiming to possess it completely. This recovery requires a profound reorientation of consciousness away from the Gnostic drive to explain and control toward the philosophical attitude of wonder and reverence. Questioning consciousness recognizes that human existence is fundamentally mysterious in a positive sense. We find ourselves thrown into existence without our choosing, equipped with minds that can recognize truth but never exhaust it, called to participate in goods that transcend our comprehension. The healthy soul embraces this mystery as the source of meaning rather than a problem to be solved. The first step in recovery involves what I call anamnesis, the recollection of fundamental experiences that the pneumopathological consciousness has repressed or forgotten. These include the experience of wonder at the fact that anything exists at all, the recognition of moral obligation that cannot be reduced to social convention, the encounter with beauty that points beyond itself, and the awareness of mortality that gives urgency to the question of life's meaning. Begin this recovery by examining your own experience of these fundamental realities. When did you last feel genuine wonder at existence itself, not merely curiosity about how things work? When have you encountered moral demands that seem to come from beyond social agreement? What experiences of beauty have moved you beyond aesthetic pleasure toward recognition of transcendent value? The pneumopathological consciousness systematically reinterprets these experiences in reductive terms. Wonder becomes merely curiosity to be satisfied by scientific explanation. Moral obligation becomes social conditioning to be analyzed and potentially overcome. Beauty becomes subjective preference without objective significance. Death becomes a problem to be solved through medical technology. Questioning consciousness, by contrast, allows these experiences to remain open to their transcendent dimension. It recognizes that wonder points toward the mystery of existence itself, that moral obligation reveals our participation in an order of reality that transcends human construction, that beauty manifests an intelligible structure in reality that calls forth love and reverence. This recovery requires what I call intellectual humility, the recognition that human reason participates in truth without ever completely grasping it. The pneumopathological consciousness cannot tolerate this limitation, demanding comprehensive explanations and final solutions. Questioning consciousness finds peace in knowing that our highest achievement is faithful participation in truth that infinitely exceeds our comprehension. Classical philosophy cultivated this questioning consciousness through the practice of dialectical inquiry, the patient exploration of fundamental questions without the demand for premature closure. Plato's dialogues exemplify this approach, leading participants deeper into mystery rather than providing simple answers to complex questions. Christian spiritual tradition contributed the recognition that questioning consciousness finds its ultimate fulfillment in the encounter with divine mystery that both satisfies and deepens our questioning. The experience of divine love provides rest for the seeking soul while opening infinite depths for further exploration. The recovery of questioning consciousness also requires what I call resistance to ideological closure, the cultivation of mental habits that remain open to dimensions of reality that ideological systems attempt to exclude. This means maintaining the capacity for experiences that cannot be reduced to the categories of any particular explanatory system. Practice this resistance by regularly engaging with sources of wisdom that challenge the dominant categories of contemporary consciousness. Read classical philosophers who take seriously questions that modern thought has prematurely closed. Study traditional religious texts that maintain awareness of transcendent reality. Cultivate relationships with people whose life experience embodies wisdom traditions different from your own. Most importantly, develop what I call contemplative attention, the capacity to attend to reality with reverence rather than with the manipulative attitude that characterizes technological consciousness. This means learning to appreciate existence for its own sake rather than for what it can provide for human purposes. The ultimate goal of this recovery is not the acquisition of new knowledge but the restoration of proper ordering of the soul, the harmonious relationship between reason, emotion, and will that allows human consciousness to participate appropriately in the structure of reality. Chapter 7: Spiritual Resistance and the Restoration of Order. The final stage of healing from pneumopathology involves active spiritual resistance to the disorder of modernity and participation in the restoration of authentic order. This is not political activism in the ordinary sense, but rather the cultivation of what I call islands of order within the sea of contemporary spiritual confusion. Spiritual resistance begins with the recognition that the pneumopathological movements of our time derive their power from the spiritual vacuum created by the breakdown of traditional ordering symbols. When human beings lose touch with transcendent reality, they become susceptible to pseudo-religious movements that promise salvation through purely immanent means. The first form of resistance is personal, the cultivation of a life ordered toward transcendent reality rather than toward the goals promoted by pneumopathological movements. This means developing practices of contemplation, study, and community participation that maintain awareness of the divine source of authentic order. Consider how you might restructure your daily life to resist the fragmenting tendencies of modern existence. Regular periods of contemplative silence create space for the soul to remember its orientation toward transcendent reality. Serious study of classical texts maintains contact with traditions of wisdom that predate modern spiritual confusion. Participation in communities ordered around transcendent goods provides alternative to the utilitarian relationships that characterize technological society. The intellectual dimension of resistance involves maintaining clarity about the fundamental questions of human existence in the face of attempts to reduce these questions to technical problems requiring expert solutions. This means preserving awareness that questions of meaning, purpose, and ultimate destiny cannot be answered by any form of specialized knowledge but require the full engagement of human consciousness with transcendent reality. Resist the pneumopathological tendency to treat every human problem as amenable to comprehensive solution through proper technique. Maintain awareness that some aspects of human existence, suffering, limitation, mortality, the tension between individual and community, are permanent features of the human condition that must be accepted and navigated with wisdom rather than eliminated through manipulation. The social dimension of resistance involves creating and supporting institutions that embody authentic order rather than the artificial constructions promoted by Gnostic movements. These might include educational institutions that transmit classical wisdom, religious communities that maintain living traditions of spiritual practice, and cultural organizations that cultivate appreciation for beauty and truth. Such institutions serve as what I call symbols of restoration, concrete manifestations of the possibility that authentic order can be recovered even within the broader context of civilizational disorder. They provide alternatives to the totalizing claims of pneumopathological movements by demonstrating that meaningful life is possible without revolutionary transformation of the human condition. The political dimension of resistance involves supporting policies and leaders that recognize the limitations of political action while working within these limitations to preserve conditions favorable to human flourishing. This means rejecting both utopian schemes that promise political salvation and cynical nihilism that denies the possibility of political improvement. Authentic political order acknowledges that government exists to preserve conditions within which human beings can pursue their ultimate destiny, not to provide that destiny itself. It recognizes that political institutions must reflect the permanent structure of human nature rather than attempting to transform that nature according to ideological specifications. Most importantly, spiritual resistance requires what I call prophetic witness, the courage to speak truth about the spiritual roots of contemporary disorder even when such truth is unwelcome to those suffering from pneumopathological consciousness. This is not mere criticism but rather the loving attempt to call souls back to health through renewed contact with reality. This witness takes many forms: the teacher who introduces students to classical texts that awaken questioning consciousness, the writer who articulates the transcendent dimensions of human experience, the artist who creates works that manifest beauty and order, the citizen who participates in political life without being seduced by revolutionary promises. The goal of all resistance is not the defeat of particular movements but the restoration of consciousness capable of recognizing and participating in authentic order. This restoration happens one soul at a time, through the patient work of formation in truth, beauty, and goodness that has always characterized genuine education and spiritual development. Remember that this work of restoration participates in the eternal activity of divine providence itself. The order we seek to restore is not a human construction but our participation in the divine ordering of reality that cannot be permanently destroyed by human rebellion, no matter how widespread or sophisticated. Conclusion. The diagnosis is complete, and the path to healing lies before us. Pneumopathology represents the characteristic spiritual sickness of our age, the systematic rebellion against reality's fundamental structure, manifesting as the compulsive need to construct worlds according to human specifications rather than participating faithfully in the given order of existence. We have seen how this sickness expresses itself in the Gnostic promise to transform the human condition through special knowledge, whether that knowledge calls itself scientific, political, or therapeutic. We have traced its historical development from the breakdown of classical and Christian consciousness through its contemporary manifestations in movements promising perfectibility through human technique. But we have also discovered the path of recovery, the restoration of questioning consciousness that remains open to transcendent mystery, the practice of spiritual resistance that creates islands of authentic order, and the patient work of formation that gradually heals the soul's relationship to reality. The pneumopathological patient seeks escape from the human condition. The healed soul finds meaning in faithful participation within that condition, accepting its limitations while growing toward transcendent fulfillment that lies beyond temporal existence. This is not pessimism but realism grounded in hope. The truth about human order cannot be permanently obscured because it is grounded in the structure of reality itself. Every awakening to authentic questioning, Every act of genuine contemplation, every moment of real love participates in the restoration of order that no amount of ideological confusion can ultimately prevent. The choice is before each of us: continued participation in the spiritual sickness of modernity, or the patient work of recovery that leads to authentic human flourishing.